Gutun Zuria dantza eta musika ikuskizunarekin ekin diogu beraz seigarren ekitaldi honi. Bien bitartean, astia denbora egingo dugu eskenatokia lehen elkarrizketarako prestatzen duten bitartean. Decía que vamos a hacer un poco de tiempo mientras preparan el escenario para la primera conversación entre Margaret Atwood y Montserrat Domínguez. Aprovecharé la ocasión para agradecer la colaboración de nuestros principales sponsors, como son BBK, así como las instituciones públicas y privadas que hacen posible este festival Gutun Zuria, entre otras las embajadas de Irlanda y de Canadá, la Asociación de Libreros de Vizcaya, FNAC, Metro Bilbao, ALSA, Bodega Urbana, de la que hablaré más tarde, quizás os interese, el Correo, Cadena Ser y los medios de comunicación Deia y Berria. Como a estas alturas, y si habéis echado un ojo al programa, lo diré, ya conoceréis, este año en esta sexta edición contaremos con la participación de autores tan destacados como Margaret Atwood, en unos breves instantes, Alberto Manguel, Héctor Abad, Faccio Linche, Iván Zaldúa, Eider Rodríguez, Margot Glantz, Arkaitz Cano y Óscar Alegría, Jon Banville y Antonio Lobo Antunes. Ziurrenik, ohartuko zineten, egileutako zenbait euskaldunak direla, gonbita egin nahi dizuegu euskarazko hitzaldietara ere etorri zaitezen. Horrez gain, eta hemen auditorio honetan sarrerak gelditzen ez direnean, bastida aretoan streaming bidez, hau da internet bidez, zuzenean jarraitu ahal izango dira ekitaldi guztiak. Okerezpanago eta zarataren arabera dena prest dago, beraz, aurkezteari ekingo diot. Margaret Atwood was born in Ottawa and grew up in northern Ontario and Quebec, and later she lived in Toronto. Throughout her rich and varied career, she has received numerous awards and honorary degrees. She is the author of more than 50 volumes of poetry, fiction and non-fiction. Montserrat Domínguez es bien conocida por la televisión, pero en la actualidad dirige la edición en español del diario Huffington Post, el diario online más leído en Estados Unidos. Beraz, besterik gabe, aurkeztu eta ongi etorri egin diezaiegun, let's welcome Montserrat Domínguez and Margaret Atwood. Txalo handi bat. Así estáis aquí.
Muchísimas gracias y muy buenas tardes. Yo no voy a hacer presentación porque es sobradamente conocida Margaret Atwood y, entre otras cosas, porque muchas de las personas que están aquí es muy probable que conozcan mejor tanto a la escritora como su obra. Pero tenía una curiosidad, viendo la danza, el baile que estábamos viendo, parecía casi un homenaje a Atwood y a su Canadá, porque hemos visto el hielo, hemos visto algunas ramas de árboles y frutos que ella describe siempre con tanta delicadeza en sus novelas, y hemos visto pájaros, que es una de sus grandes pasiones.
I thought that it was an homage to the Spanish custom of exchanging the book and the rose every year, and I thought it was very wonderful that they made books look so sexy.
Bueno, ha sido una preciosidad sin duda esta apertura, pero yo tengo una duda porque, vamos a ver, ella podría haberse dedicado, Margaret Atwood, a la ciencia. Yo sé que he visto desde ahora, desde la perspectiva actual, con los 50 títulos que tiene escrito, con todos los campos que ha tocado en la literatura, resulta absurdo. Pero ella nació en Canadá en una época en la que los niños trabajaban, no solamente al otro lado del Atlántico, aquí también se vivían los coletazos de la Gran Depresión. Podía haber sido científica como sus padres, o podía haber decidido explotar y explorar algunos de los trabajos que tuvo de muy jovencita, prácticamente de niña, lo que ahora se consideraría como explotación infantil, porque ella no solamente cuidaba niños o recogía arándanos, sino que hacía exhibiciones deportivas de tiro al arco, y tengo entendido que también fue capaz de montar un espectáculo de marionetas que le funcionó razonablemente bien. Y yo me pregunto si Margaret Atwood fantasea con si hubiera habido posiblemente otro camino que no fuera la literatura. ¿Qué sería Margaret Atwood si no fuera escritora, poeta, ensayista?
What would I have been in another life?
Or in the next life.
Or in the next life. How many do I have? So I could have gone on to be a biologist, in which case I would have been a botanist, most likely, because plants stand still. They don't move around a lot. They're easy to study. So if I had been a biologist, I would probably be doing some genetic manipulation of your potatoes right now.
What for?
Well, I could make them glow in the dark, or I could make different colors of potatoes, or possibly make them more nutritional, or make them more intelligent.
Así que toda esa pasión, de alguna manera, por la ciencia ficción y por la ficción vinculada con lo que puede ocurrir, tiene una razón profunda, y es el interés de Atwood por cómo los humanos somos capaces de manipular lo que nos rodea, ¿no?
I started on both paths as a child. And as children, my brother and I both wrote both books and comic books. Mm-hmm. And these books and comic books took place on other planets. So the interest in science fiction goes back to my childhood. My brother was a prolific writer, and he became a scientist, and I became a writer who is nonetheless interested in following the plot of science. I'm not very interested in outer space. Mm-hmm. Not very. I'm not very interested in 11 dimensions. I'm not very interested in the uncertainty principle, but I am very interested in neurology and in the ability to create new life forms, which we have now, and the ability to combine life forms, which we also have now developed. And that is potentially a much more dangerous thing than the development of atomic energy. Think about that.
Esa es la diferencia de la que siempre habla Margaret Atwood, cuando se refiere a que lo que le apasiona no es tanto la ciencia ficción, sino la ficción especulativa. Es decir, basándose en lo que está ocurriendo ya, en los procedimientos científicos, en lo que los científicos nos están apuntando ya que puede ser el futuro, ¿cómo podría ser ese futuro? ¿Qué es lo que más le inquieta de las cosas que se dejan atrás y de lo que, más allá de los cambios, de la manipulación de la forma de vida y del cerebro, porque ahora se está investigando de qué manera podemos hacer una mezcla entre lo biológico y lo tecnológico, de manera que las capacidades del ser humano vayan infinitamente más allá, se conviertan en superhumanos o superhéroes de verdad. ¿Eso es algo que le preocupe o le parezca que realmente está a la vuelta de la esquina?
We're well on the way to doing that, but when we say we, what do we mean by we? Do we mean all of us? Do we mean some of us, or do we mean just a few of us? And when you read people's plans in this direction, it usually turns out to be just a few of us. In which case you would have two different classes of people, some with the superpowers and prolonged life, and then everyone else. Now, you've studied the French Revolution, in which once upon a time there were some with a lot of things, and then there were a lot of people with almost nothing. That's not usually a good story. It doesn't usually end well. It usually ends with the people with almost nothing wanting to cut the heads off those who it usually ends with the 99% wanting to cut the heads off the 1%. So if I were the 1%, I would think carefully about that. I would think carefully about developing a class of people with many more powers than everyone else. Tends to be resented. So there's that danger, but that's with human beings. Think of other life forms. For instance, think of the power that we have right now. We have this, we know how to do it. to create diseases to which no one has any immunity. We can do that now. I'm glad we haven't, but we could. So we tend to think only about ourselves and our superpowers and curing diseases. We can do that through genetic manipulation now. We can do it with some. That field is developing very rapidly. Those would be the good results. But we are not the only life form on the planet. There are lots of other ones. So it's going to be a very interesting story. But let me just move from that to the writing of fiction.
Yeah.
And the writing of fiction is it may have ideas in it, but it's primarily always about people. Even if it's about rabbits, it's about people. So not only the proper study of mankind is man, but the interesting study for humankind is human beings. We're pretty fascinated with ourselves. And when we tell stories, they are somehow always about us. So as a novelist, you have to put stories and people at the center of what you're doing, no matter what the rest of the content is. How we will behave is going to depend a lot on our human nature, not just on the tools we develop, that's the science part, but on how we choose to use those tools and who is in control of them.
Claro, no es una cuestión de los conejos cuando escribimos de ellos o de los cerdos. Y estoy pensando en George Orwell, de quien Margaret Atwood ha escrito mucho y siempre le ha reverenciado como su héroe o como una de sus grandes referencias, porque leyó Rebelión en la Granja cuando apenas tenía 9 años. Y yo no sé si es una edad recomendable para leer Rebelión en la Granja y no quedarte de alguna manera marcado de por vida. ¿Es una buena edad o no? En cualquier caso, para Margaret Atwood supuso el arranque o el comienzo o el descubrimiento de una dimensión distinta en la que los cerdos, por ejemplo, podían ser terriblemente injustos.
Very unfair.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that Animal Farm by George Orwell was a political satire. I thought it really was about animals. And I was expecting it to be like the cozy books about animals that are written for children. So happy pigs, friendly pigs, well-behaved pigs. And instead it was this really harsh story about the pigs behaving very badly and the other animals allowing themselves to be fooled and manipulated by them with some extremely bad results. So I was very upset by it. It was not a children's book. I was deluded by it. And it was quite a shock to me. I'm not sure it certainly wasn't the first time I knew that there could be bad people in stories. There are often bad people in stories. But I thought it was going to be the kind of book in which the bad people are defeated, as in Little Red Riding Hood. Mm-hmm. But in Animal Farm, the bad pigs win. That was upsetting. Children do not like the bad pigs to win.
Hablamos de fábulas, que es un poco el título con el que queremos comenzar el festival de escritores y de lectores, porque en todo escritor hay un lector, y hemos visto cómo Margaret era una lectora voraz a pesar de la confusión en principio del libro que encontraba, pero yo he leído también cómo la edad es importante, en qué momento uno lee determinado libro, y Margaret ha hecho referencia en alguna ocasión a Virginia Woolf, y cómo un libro que ya leyó de jovencita también, con 18, con 19 años, que no entendió absolutamente nada, cuando vuelve a caer en tus manos años después, es cuando eres capaz no solamente de descubrir la maestría del escritor o de la escritora en este caso en alcanzarnos, sino también las emociones que narra en el libro. ¿Cómo saber cuándo es el momento ideal para acercarte a un libro? ¿O cuál ha sido el descubrimiento que Margaret Atwood ha tenido que no supo valorar, saborear, disfrutar con el placer que uno debe con un gran escritor, porque no había llegado en el momento oportuno.
We never know when the right time is. I read Moby Dick as a child because it had pictures.
Claro.
I didn't understand it, but it had pictures, and I was very interested in the pictures. So I then read it later, when I was in my 20s. I understood more. And then I read it again in my 40s, and I understood it really a lot more. And I recently wrote a piece for the New York Times about what you would teach the aliens about the United States. If you had to start with the aliens and explain it to them, how to explain the United States. And I said, well, you would tell the aliens first about Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, Young Goodman Brown, and then to explain to them the nature of the United States as an expansionist country, and in relation to oil, you would have them read Moby Dick. So its meaning increases with each 10 years of life that you add to your own life. Mm-hmm. I think some books are perfect to read as an adolescent, but you read them later, they hold up. And I would say Robert Louis Stevenson. Of course, we devour Treasure Island. We devour Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's still good at my age. At my age, it's still good. Some things do not hold their charm in the same way. We move on. And some things simply grow with you as you yourself grow. I'm not too interested in some of the books. I'm not too interested anymore in some of the books I read at the age of 14. Mm-hmm. But others stay with you. So it's like that, and it's like that for everyone. And people say to you, what of yours should I read first? And I say, what do you like? You know, tell me what sort of book you like now, and maybe I can help you answer that question. But if you don't know what a person likes, you can't tell them what they might find of interest.
Le voy a hacer una pregunta que le planteaba antes y que nos preocupa a todos los que tenemos hijos, y es ¿qué deberíamos intentar que leyeran nuestros hijos para que descubran el inmenso placer que es leer, ahora que además tienen tantas otras distracciones y situaciones tan estimulantes a través de la pantalla, del ordenador, del iPad o del televisor, que hace que parezca que la lectura no es importante? Y Margaret me contestaba algo que, bueno, tenemos una cierta idea idealizada, como si en otras épocas se leyera muchísimo más de lo que en realidad era, porque no siempre se ha leído tanto como nosotros tendemos a pensar que se leía. ¿Qué podemos hacer para que los chicos más jóvenes descubran que no solamente a través de las pantallas, o a través de las pantallas, pero la literatura tiene una capacidad tan interesante como un videojuego de hacerte descubrir planetas, aventuras, historias, revoluciones?
First of all, people are always worried about what their children are reading. You can go back to Rome. It's the same story. Young people today, I don't know what's becoming of them, etc. Through the ages. In the 19th century, they were constantly worried because young people were reading too many novels. They were considered a low form of reading then. And earlier than that, they were worried that young people were reading too many romances. In the 18th century, there were even maladies of reading. You know, people were becoming addicted to these novels. So there's always been that worry. My generation, children were reading too many comic books. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very bad for them. But children have to work their way into what they find interesting. So you have to let them read whatever they want, whatever they feel drawn to. A lot of teenage boys have started reading because of Stephen King, who writes horror. A lot of teenage girls have started reading because of Twilight, which is about vampires. A lot of young people now are reading about zombies. You may not approve of zombies, but they are reading about them. There are several online sites where you can post your own stories. You can, as a young person, write on your phone, put up installments of your writing. You don't have to use your own name. This is a plus because it means your parents, those dictatorial people, your parents, your teachers will not know it's you, and you don't have to worry about your friends and peer group laughing at your steamy vampire story. If you go on to Wattpad, W-A-T-T-P-A-D, it exists in 25 languages. It has 15 million members, and they're reading and writing. They're mostly young. They're reading and writing on their phones largely, 70% of it on the phone, and the rest of it they're reading online. So this is where you're going to find a lot of young readers and writers right now. You may not approve of their interests, but that's how they get into storytelling, and then they move on from that. So we reading Flash Gordon and Spider-Man. No, it wasn't grown up. But we weren't grown up either. So you move into stories through things that fascinate you at that age. I have to say that franchises like Star Wars have huge numbers of followers and groupies. And we have moved in recent years through the vampire phenomenon. Now we appear to be into the zombie phenomenon. Already zombies are becoming cuddly. It didn't take long. At first we thought these zombies, they're not charming in any way. But now we have 2 film versions. Warm Bodies. Love can bring them back to life. How lovely. And number 2 that has just started in England, which is called, what is it called? In the Flesh. We have a zombie who is being reintegrated into human society. We have cuddly zombie plush toys. I don't know why. We have to make monsters nice, but we do. So it happened with dinosaurs first. Dinosaurs, bears, vampires used to be very unpleasant. Now they're sexy. Werewolves, they used to be really horrible. Now you kind of like to be one. You got superpowers, run around at night, those things kids like to do.
Y tenemos ahora, por ejemplo, distopías que están teniendo un éxito tremendo, fundamentalmente gracias al cine y a las series de televisión. Mañana, precisamente, en el Huffington Post tenemos un post hablando de cómo las mujeres...
And books.
Sí, por supuesto. The Hunger Games, los Juegos del Hambre, que nacen de un libro y que ahora son película, pero serie también de televisión, con un cambio sustancial, y es que ya no son los hombres los protagonistas, y es algo sobre lo que Margaret Atwood ha escrito también, porque ella, como escritora también de distopías, siempre habían sido hombres los que escribían, y por tanto la perspectiva masculina era la que imperaba. Y sin embargo ella rompió con esa tendencia, y ahora vemos cómo cada vez más en estos que atrapan sobre todo a los más jóvenes y a los no tan jóvenes, empieza a haber mujeres protagonistas de esos mundos tremendamente oscuros y dificultuosos, donde una heroína es la que consigue sacar adelante una rebelión contra la opresión y contra los tiranos.
Okay, so this actually started a while ago. I don't know whether you follow video games at all. So Lara Croft.
Yeah, claro.
Okay, so woman warrior, etc. Going even further back than that, there is a big joined at the hip connection between anthropology, archaeology on the one hand, and science fiction fantasy on the other. The science fiction fantasy really got going in the 19th century when people started digging up and discovering other societies. So going back, we had a book by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas called Reindeer Moon, which was set in prehistoric times and had a female protagonist. Then we had the mass market version of that, which was Jean M. Auel and her Mammoth Hunter series. Okay, and again it was female narrators. So why do we write these books in which people are put in extreme conditions, whether they be prehistory, whether they be the future? I think possibly because we like to imagine ourselves in those minimalist circumstances and wonder how well we would do. Most of us now live in cities. We don't know what makes the light bulb turn on. But we would probably be able to handle some matches and wood. So in some ways we are imagining what we would do if all of this technology that we don't know how to work were to disappear. Would we be adequate? Would we be up to the challenge of getting by if we were living in reduced circumstances? I think that's part of the appeal. And I think part of it is also that once you have an adventure romance and you change the gender, it is going to be the woman on the horse. There was a children's book a while ago called The Paper Bag Princess, which was a takeoff on the prince rescuing maiden stories. And it ended with the paper bag princess rescuing this kind of stupid prince who wasn't grateful. And she says, "Oh, okay, then goodbye." So it didn't have the traditional romantic ending. And I think we've been rearranging stories like that for at least 20 years, if not longer. So it's people playing with story modes, which we've always done. No sooner was there Greek and Roman mythology than the Greeks and Romans themselves started making fun of it. So this is a very old thing. And we're doing it now in other forms. But I think people like to imagine themselves as competent. Do they not? I have actually known in my life some very competent women. So why should they not be in stories? I've also known some very competent men. And they can be in stories too. They can all be competent. Which is what it's like in hunter-gatherer societies. Everybody has to be good at what they're doing. One of the best examples is the Inuit society of the far north in Canada. Not traditional society. The women made the waterproof clothing that the hunters had to wear in order to catch the food. So if either one of those people did their job badly, they would all starve. If the clothing wasn't good, it would leak, the man would freeze. If the man wasn't a good hunter, he wouldn't catch anything, and everyone would die. So those sets of skills were respected on both sides. You needed both.
Sí, pero digamos que esa curiosidad permanente por saber si seríamos capaces de sobrevivir o qué haríamos en una situación límite, es verdad que es transversal y que perdura desde los tiempos. Siempre ha sido una aventura en la que todos, hombres y mujeres, nos hemos podido sentir identificados. Pero el mundo ha cambiado y hay quienes consideran que estas distopías, después del 11 de septiembre, de los atentados del 11 de septiembre, después de que cambiara también de alguna manera los paradigmas que considerábamos sobre la ecuación entre la libertad y la seguridad y las amenazas exteriores que suponía el terrorismo o un ataque exterior, en este caso como fue el 11 de septiembre, y ahora con la crisis económica, esas distopías adquieren ahora una categoría mayor aún. Es un poco la ficción que se aproxima más a esta sensación que tenemos de que el mundo realmente se acaba o que no sabemos muy bien. Es posible que no haya una guerra, pero es posible que lo que nos espere sea peor aún que lo que nosotros sabemos de la guerra.
Don't worry about the earth ending anytime soon.
Menos mal.
Unless it's hit by a comet or, another, unless it blows up. So the earth itself, the geology, I don't think we'll be able to destroy that anytime soon. You might have to give some thought to the fish. You might have to give some thought to the biosphere. The financial crisis is one of the reasons for the zombie phenomenon. For this reason, vampires are produced by conditions of affluence. You can tell. They've all got fancy capes. They've got castles.
Yeah.
They're quite rich.
Yeah.
Because they've lived forever, so they've got a lot of savings in the bank. They're very smart. They're articulate. They talk a lot. So that's, vampires, they've got quite nice furniture and all of those things. Zombies, on the other hand, are very badly dressed. As soon as you become a zombie, your wardrobe goes. Your teeth, gone. They're not attractive, and they wander around in crowds. Vampires are individuals. They have life stories. Anne Rice goes on and on about their life stories, which are quite long because they've lived so long. So you can keep the series going for a very long time. My life 500 years ago, my life 300 years ago, you can stretch it out. Zombies are a mass phenomenon. Some people have connected them with the Occupy Wall Street movement. So zombies, I have no stake in society, I'm not interested, I'm just going to wander around like this and kind of mob people. So they're like flash mobs, they're like drug addicts, they're like the urban poor, they're like people who are detached from society, and they're like the Black Death. They're like the Great Mortality. They are a mass affliction. They destroy infrastructure. Everything crumbles. They are typical of periods of financial crisis. You can see why. So in part, the zombie phenomenon is, okay, maybe I'm not going to have a career. Maybe I won't have an income. Maybe I'll be wandering around like this with a lot of my friends who are also like this. But if I am like that, I don't have any responsibilities because I don't have a brain. So they are very much connected with that feeling of nothing's working, inertia, what can I do, nothing can be done. And I think that's one reason why they're popular at the moment. They're tuning into that. The fact that we're now bringing them back in warm bodies and in the flesh, maybe we're about to have an economic upturn.
Yeah.
I would say that's a sign.
Yo tengo curiosidad por saber cómo se nos ve desde Canadá, es decir, desde el otro lado del Atlántico, una Europa que da la impresión que cada vez tiene más zombies. también, que están pululando sin acabar de encontrar una salida a una crisis preocupante y en una situación realmente preocupante para todos nosotros. ¿Cómo se ve desde el otro lado del Atlántico? ¿Como una sociedad de vampiros, quizás?
We have... No, I have faith in you. There are a lot of smart people here. Something that has just been revealed is that trillions and petillions of dollars are residing in offshore bank accounts. So now that we know that, maybe we know where some of that economic surplus went. I do think that the economic health of a system is dependent on a certain minimum level of honesty amongst politicians and amongst corporate leaders. And once politicians and corporate leaders decide that they have no responsibility to the citizens, you're in a bad place. Unfortunately, the internet and airplanes have made it possible to move stuff out of a country. You can strip mine a country and take all its assets somewhere else. Now that this has been revealed, possibly some of the illegally placed money will now be recovered and put back into the countries from which it was removed. The Swiss banking system has something to answer for. The secrecy makes it possible for people to behave that way, and so do the offshore bank accounts. So I'm a person who is in favor of more transparency, both in the financial world and in government. We would like to know where this money is instantly going, because it can, through the internet, it can go instantly. So that's one clue. Start digging there. But you also have to have leaders who feel that they're actually the leaders of something. You know, that you have to feel that they're the leaders of a country, not just the leaders of their own little group.
Tenemos un pequeño problema con los líderes últimamente aquí en Europa. En Estados Unidos es diferente, en Canadá también, pero en Europa tenemos un pequeño problema de liderazgo en estos momentos. Déjeme que le pregunte...
So do we.
Sí, también.
Everybody has a leadership issue to a certain extent.
Sí.
And one of those reasons is that the leaders don't entirely know what to do.
Yeah.
It's not that they are perversely not doing the right thing. It's not that they know what the right thing is and they're not doing it. I think sometimes they just don't know what will work.
Ya, pero no debería un líder saber, o precisamente no es uno un líder porque sabe respecto a los demás cuál es el camino a seguir, o una lideresa.
I think maybe 2,000 years ago that was true, because the amount of information that you had to grasp was much smaller. The situation we find ourselves in now has got various problems going on in different spheres at the same time.
Yeah.
So that is why they don't entirely know what is the right thing to do. So you have, on the one hand, you have financial problems. On the other hand, you have problems at the biosphere. You have the climate change problem. You have the problem that very, very large corporations have got much more money than a lot of countries. So they can essentially buy and sell national governments. That isn't how democracy was supposed to work. You have the problems of certain people with let us say, religious beliefs that are not entirely in tune with reality, as is generally experienced. So you have all of these different kinds of problems, and you have problems in the media as well. So who's going to be in charge of the news? Who is going to be in charge of the news? Is it going to be Huffington Post? Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be somebody who owns a newspaper? If so, are they dependent on advertising? What does that tell us? So whose news? You know, in whose name is the news being put out there? Yeah. It's very interesting. We now have numerous sources, numerous points of view. Once upon a time, it was a much smaller number. Once upon a time, the Times of England and the New York Times were considered the official news in the English-speaking world. There are probably a couple of papers, one in Italy, a couple in France, usually one left, one right.
Yes.
And that is a pattern left over from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now we have multiple news.
Y eso es una de las cosas que ha cambiado para siempre. Y yo quiero preguntarte, Margaret, por otro de los cambios, aunque te he leído en alguna ocasión decir que, por ejemplo, el cambio para las mujeres, o los cambios que considerábamos que podían hacerse o que podían venir de una manera más rápida, hay mucha más resistencia de la que considerábamos. Los cambios no se producen a la misma velocidad. Pero quería preguntárselo a alguien que ha sido considerada como una feminista antes de que el propio término se utilizara o se hiciera una corriente, y por supuesto que muchas mujeres empezaran a utilizar la etiqueta como la definición de todo un movimiento. ¿Cómo estamos en este momento? En el año 2013, en Europa hay una mujer que realmente podemos decir que es la que gobierna Europa, que es la canciller alemana Angela Merkel. Es verdad que ha habido otras dirigentes como Margaret Thatcher, a la cual acaba de morir esta semana, y pronto, la semana que viene, van a despedir en un funeral de Estado. Pero realmente, y esa es una preocupación continua en todas las novelas y en toda la ficción de Margaret Atwood, el papel de la mujer, las preocupaciones profundas y su implicación en la sociedad ha cambiado tanto como uno cabría o hubiera querido esperar hace apenas unos años.
You may have thought that. Let's go back in time. So the problem of women, the women problem, was hotly discussed in the 19th century. Throughout the 19th century, hotly debated in all kinds of ways. Should they have the vote? Should they be educated? Were they reading too many novels? Should they wear corsets? If they wore corsets, was that constricting them, or was it necessary because without their corset they would just fall in a sort of puddle on the floor?
Really?
If they were educated, would their reproductive organs shrink because their energy was going into their brains too much? Should they be allowed to ride bicycles? A dubious pursuit led to sex. Not only that, it led to something called bicycle face. Because if you rode your bicycle, the speed at which you were riding the bicycle was going to push your face back. This is true. People thought that. Bicycle face. Some people would pay money for that now.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Ride your bicycle really fast. Your face will just...
Yeah.
So all of these things, bloomers, Mrs. Bloomer, reform of dress for women, thought a nut bar in her day. Votes for women, chaining yourself to the Parliament gates. Women did not get the vote in Canada until the 20s, 1920s, big deal for voting. Should women be in politics? A nasty place. Were they too fragile and gentle to be in politics? Some thought they were. So this stuff has been going on for a long time. Along came the Depression. In the Depression, if you were a woman with a job and you got married, you were expected to give up your job so that a man could have it, because why should there be two jobs in one family? Came the war. In places like the United States, Canada, and England, women went to work. Their labor was needed. Or war ended, there was a concerted propaganda move to get them back into their homes. Back into their homes, 4 kids, washer, dryer, vacuum cleaner, why wouldn't you be in a state of bliss all day, every day? So women were being told that. Men had come back from the war, having had near-death experiences, and they were not ready to go into the split-level bungalow and be amused with the washing machine. Mm-hmm. Along came Hugh Hefner, started Playboy magazine, said, don't bother with this domestic stuff. Come down to the Hefner Palace and play with the bunnies.
The Playboy. The
Playboy bunnies. Mm-hmm. So we had a divide. Women were being told this, men were being told that, and that's what produced Betty Friedan. And with the results that we then saw in 1969, when the women's movement appeared, a product of Playboy magazine, the civil rights movement, in which women were told the only place for a woman in the civil rights movement is on her back. I quote. So this, you can see that there was a perfect storm of opposing forces. Mm-hmm. And that's what produced the women's movement in 1969, which was a protest movement. Your question is, why didn't everything change overnight? Because nothing ever changes overnight. The other thing leading to that 1969 event was the birth control pill becoming generally available. And the other factor was the invention of what is the name for it in Spanish?
What?
Pantyhose.
Las medias.
2 stockings all in one garment.
Las medias.
Yeah, so those were invented. That led to the mini skirt, which would not have happened otherwise. Think about it. So big.
Jamás se me hubiera ocurrido.
Yeah, big fashion change. Yes. So the mini skirt hit. Birth control pill, mini skirt. Reaction to being told you had to stay in the house with the washing machine. All of that hit at once. And combined with the general availability of marijuana and the psychedelic revolution. Mm-hmm. Bang, it was like an explosion. Was it good for women? Not necessarily. Once upon a time, it was a no-no to have sex before marriage. During that revolution, it was a no-no not to have sex. So compulsory sex, that's not, I mean, you don't always want that. No thanks. What's the matter with you? You're not cool. You're not cool. So that happened. And then, of course, there was a reaction against that. So it's always push back, push back, and women trying this and that and finding that it doesn't work for them. So maybe the washing machine wasn't the answer to everything, but neither was you have to be sexually available to everybody. Mm-hmm. That was tried in the early days of the Russian Revolution, by the way. It didn't work then either. Mm-hmm. So what do women really want? Women want to be able to make their own choices about what they might happen to want and what they might happen not to want. And that's very simple. It's like human beings. Like other human beings want to do that too.
Pero yo me pregunto, ¿llegará algún día en el que Margaret Atwood, en una de sus conferencias, entrevistas, tiene cientos, recorre tantísimos kilómetros al año a todos los lugares donde le invitan, en el que no le pregunten por cuál es la perspectiva femenina cuando uno escribe sobre unas cosas u otras? Pero es que además ella, yo lo he leído en este libro, en La maldición de Eva, que es un libro que se publicó hace ya tiempo en España, pero que son algunos de sus ensayos y de discursos que ha pronunciado en universidades y en distintas conferencias. Cuenta en alguna ocasión como algún colega escritor, porque Margaret Atwood es poeta, aunque es menos conocida en España por su poesía, decía que todas las mujeres que escribían poesía eran sospechosas. porque se estaban introduciendo en un terreno que era 100% masculino. Me imagino que de ciencia ficción ni hablamos, ¿no?, de los libros de Margaret Atwood dedicados a la ciencia ficción. ¿Se ha sentido Margaret Atwood en numerosas ocasiones sospechosa por el hecho de ser mujer y escritora?
Well, without a doubt. Did I ever pay any attention to it? No. I don't think you can be too worried about that, and you just have to deal with each instance of it as it comes up. I know who you're talking about. It was in the 1960s. A person who said that poetry should only be written by men. I mean, we got a lot of that then. But what you have to keep saying is that women are individuals. That all women are not sort of part of, they're not like yogurt. You know, it's not the same all the way through. So there are these women and those women, and they wear different clothes, they're different sizes, they live in different countries, they have different amounts of money, they're different ages. There isn't just a women's point of view. The point of view of a young girl in Afghanistan who is being threatened with death because she wants to go to school is different from the point of view of a young girl in California who doesn't want to do her homework because it's boring. I mean, there's a world of difference there. One would kill for the chance or be killed. The other one, it's been handed to her, she takes it for granted. So that this is going to be, these variations are all over the world, all different economic levels, many different ages, different ethnic groups, different racial groups, people facing discrimination here or for something else over there. Everyone has a different set of circumstances and problems, and that's why novels are important. Because only that form can put us inside another person's life to a full extent. You can get movies that show things, but to be inside somebody else's mind, the novel form is the only thing that can take you there. That's my sermon.
Bueno, Margaret, en unos minutos vamos a pedir a quienes tengan interés y curiosidad, porque estoy seguro que hay muchos lectores que conocen muy bien y que han tenido una relación con tus obras especial y que van a tener curiosidad por preguntarte, pero yo tengo también la curiosidad por saber cómo y cuándo escribe Margaret Atwood. Es decir, cuál es el proceso, todos los que leemos y tenemos admiración por quien es capaz de desarrollar todo ese proceso creativo y además nos sentimos incapaces de reproducirlo, tenemos curiosidad por conocer el detalle de cómo uno, si escribir para Margaret Atwood son unas horas determinadas al día, si hay un tiempo cuando está trabajando en una novela. Por cierto, está a punto de salir una edición, bueno, los libros ya los he visto aquí en español de un grupo de cuentos que ya estaban publicados, pero es la primera vez que se editan aquí en castellano, pero dentro de unos meses va a salir un nuevo libro de Margaret Atwood que completa la última trilogía de Madame, y está publicando también una novela por entregas, una serie, un serial como en el siglo XVIII, Positron. Tengo curiosidad por saber cómo funciona la mente creativa de Margaret Atwood, en qué momento decide, me pongo a trabajar, escribo todos los días X horas, aprovecho los aviones cuando estoy viajando. ¿Cómo lo hace? ¿Cómo llega a la chispa y cómo es el proceso de ponerse a trabajar en ello?
I'll show you my secret weapon.
A ver, el arma secreta. ¿Escribes a mano?
You can have one too.
Yeah.
Yes.
¿De verdad?
I write, yes. I handwrite to begin everything. I can work on a keyboard, but I never learned to touch type. So on the airplane coming here, I wrote an 800-word piece for the New Yorker. which you may see in a little while. And in my hotel room right now, I did the revision of 15 pages of my next positron serial number 4. And I will continue on with that. I will probably have it finished by the time I go back to Canada. Email and the internet is very facilitating for getting drafts of things back and forth to an editor. We don't no longer have to rely on the mail for that. So you can whip it off to someone, they can whip it back to you quite quickly. So that's part of what is happening. We have some tools now that are good. One of them is the little squiggly line on the Word document that indicates that maybe you made a typo. Or maybe you didn't. Or maybe they're wrong. I always edit on paper. Always. Because you can't see things as well on screen, and spell check is not accurate. If there is a word that is really a word, but it's not the word you intended, spell check will not catch that. You have to edit on paper.
Con un lápiz.
Sí. 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 A.
¿Y una goma? Sí. Okay.
Also important.
Pero entonces no es capaz de escribir en la habitación de un hotel o en el avión en un vuelo transoceánico, ¿no? Yo estaba tratando de imaginarme cómo es el despacho, el ordenador, si necesita una tranquilidad, si necesita ver pájaros a través de la ventana, ya que le apasionan los pájaros también.
It looks like a mess.
Sí.
It has piles of books all over the floor. It has books in shelves. It has piles of paper here and there. So I don't like anybody to move anything, because then I can't find it. So I know where everything is. I just don't touch it. And I was like that as a child, and luckily I had understanding parents. So I had to clean up my room, all except that part where I was doing my projects, and nobody touched that. So that is called the creative space. The creative space always looks like a mess to anyone else looking at it. I also work with post-it notes quite a lot. Little scraps of paper stuck here and there. So that's what it's like. And how many drafts do I write of anything? Six minimum. 6. That's before we get to the editing with the editor. Okay, with the copy editor, we sit side by side at a table. She has her copy, I have my copy. We've stuck those little markers all over our pages and written all over them. And we then have to sit with the pages and compare the typo she has found, the typo I have found. The phrase she has found that's a repetition, the one I have found. The word substitution I have made, the thing she has found. So Oryx and Craig, she said, and this is why I like working with her. So Jimmy, you give him 5 jolt bars to eat. He eats 1 on this page, 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 and 1 on this page. You either have to give him 1 more, or he has to eat 1 fewer. Because your readers will find that. You know they will. Somebody will count. You made a mistake. That will happen.
Es completamente artesanal, esa manera de editar, ¿no? Y de terminar un libro y de repasarlo.
It's very visual, and it involves a pencil. So we're talking about the last stages of a book in which we're double-checking everything. And that the edit of the pages took from 9 in the morning until 12 midnight. at which point we were having a blizzard in Canada, and my copy editor's car would not start. Now that's dedication. The galleys, and the galleys are when it's already been typeset. The galleys took from 9:30 in the morning until about 4 in the afternoon. So by that time we had fewer of these notes to compare, but we had quite a few anyway.
Muy bien. Margaret, ¿te parece que le preguntemos a quienes nos acompañan si hay alguna cuestión, si hay alguna pregunta que quieren compartir contigo? Porque estoy segura, ya tenemos las luces que nos permiten ver las caras y sería interesante ver si hay alguna pregunta. Y mientras tanto, porque hay 2 micrófonos, uno a cada lado de la sala, me gustaría que enseñaras los blocs de notas que has encontrado aquí en la entrada y que te han llamado poderosamente la atención y te has llevado todos los que había. Porque curiosamente no sabemos si les servirá de inspiración o no, pero tiene ojo de lince para detectar. Aquí a la entrada donde se vendían los libros, no solamente de Margaret, sino algunos de los autores que van a estar aquí en el festival, se venden unos blocs de notas con unos personajes, con unos animales extraños. Esto es no sé cómo lo explicaría en español, cómo definiría una especie de renopaloma en bicicleta. Es un tipo de experimento científico, ¿no?, que ha salido mal. Alguno de ellos. Esto es una oveja con botas, por ejemplo, ¿no? Y un pulpo con cabeza de... Son pájaros todo. En realidad son pájaros.
On the head, yes.
On the head, son pájaros, sí, con diferentes... Bueno, todo esto lo he encontrado, yo no sé si les servirán de alguna manera de inspiración. Y esto es un gallo con cara de morsa, y fumando en pipa, directamente. Bueno, yo no veo si hay alguna pregunta.
Yes, I once gave a lecture on giant squids in literature. And Alberto Mangel, who is sitting in the audience, has contributed some more giant squids in literature to my list of giant squids that have appeared in books.
Así.
Think yourself of how many giant squids you have read about.
Sí.
A ver, ¿se me oye?
Sí, ahora sí.
Hola, buenas noches. Bueno, antes que nada, gracias por la oportunidad de poder preguntarle a Margaret Atwood esta noche. Le quería preguntar, he visto que Margaret Atwood es una mujer activa en Twitter, de hecho he visto que ha retuiteado a Montserrat esta tarde. Quería preguntarle un poco cómo se relaciona con las nuevas tecnologías y si eso le permite tener un trato posiblemente más cercano con sus lectores y con la gente que sigue su trayectoria. Gracias.
When my brother was a young scientist, he worked on mosquitoes. And he had his mosquitoes in a cage. And every day he put his arm inside the cage so that the mosquitoes could feed. That is a dedicated scientific experimenter. So I consider myself to be like that. I am exploring the new technologies in the interests of young writers who may not be able to put their arms in the cage with the mosquitoes. But at my age, it doesn't matter. If I make a horrible mistake, who cares? So I like to be able to report back about some of these new things, what I think works, what I think doesn't work. I have a summation of those on something called the Writing Platform, which is in England. And if you go online and find the Writing Platform, you will hear what I have to say about what this is good for and what is that is good for, and maybe you shouldn't bother with these other things. What I would say in general about social media is if you're a writer, don't do any of it unless it appeals to you and you find it comfortable. because otherwise you will just be wasting your time. Some people really like it, others don't. The most important thing for a writer is to write your book well. And so if you cannot write your book well, all of these other things are superfluous anyway. There is a lot of chat online about all kinds of things related to this, self-publishing, whether it's good or bad, tools for it, how you should build out your social media profile, etc., etc. Publishers are pushing it forward because it means that the writer is doing some of the work of publicity, or so they fondly hope. Now, it's not so good for them if the writer does that and does it badly. And not everybody has the personality and interest in doing such things. I do Twitter, I don't do Facebook, for instance. My publishers run a Facebook page, one of those kind of sites. And that happens because Facebook will generate a page for you whether you want it or not. So are you going to see some sort of medium control of it, or are you going to let other people do it? There are a number of, there's a thing called O'Reilly's Publishing Tools for Change, which will tell you about every new gimmick and technique on the face of the planet. And they also run conferences in which people talk endlessly about publishing. But I have this to say about all of that. Any of these forms is 2 tin cans and a string. Any. The author is tin can A, the reader is tin can B, and everything between them is string. The model I'm using is the walkie-talkies we made as children. So you're saying, hello, and it goes along the string, and the other person hears, hello. So where the money is being made is on the string. And that's why everybody is endlessly talking about it. The publishers, the internet publishers, the e-books, the this, the that. I did give a presentation at O'Reilly's Tools of Change, and my presentation was about the author. So you can invent all the tools you like, but if there are no authors to use them, it doesn't matter. So my metaphor that I used was a Canadian one. A moose dies in the forest. 32 other life forms are sustained by eating that dead moose. Then I drew a dead Shakespeare, because I did my own slides on my PowerPoint. And I showed my dead Shakespeare, and I showed all of the other life forms that are being sustained by that dead Shakespeare, or living author, whatever it may be. And that would include publishers, libraries, editors, book reviewers, students, lecturers on literature, people giving conferences, everything. If there were no authors, none of it would happen. So my plea was, all right, let's pay some attention to the A part of the A, B, and string arrangement. Some of these string people think it would be great for all of the authors to donate their material for nothing, so that they, the string owners, can have all of the profit. I'm sure it would be nice for them, but they must remember that even the authors, eager though they are to be published, which they are, even they have to eat. So the question is, how shall the authors eat? I can tell you the 5 different ways. There only are 5. Number 1, be rich. So inherit a lot of money. That's good. Number 2, marry it. Number 3, have a patron.
Have a what?
A patron. So that patron used to be maybe the Pope, a duke, a prince, somebody like that.
Mecenas.
Now it's a government, a corporation, somebody who gives money for an artistic project. So number 4, have a day job. have another job. You have the day job. I've had a number of them. And then in your spare time, if you still have any energy, you can write your deathless masterpieces in the evening. Oh, you're up all the time, but never mind. You don't get any sleep. And number 5, go to the marketplace. You turn your deathless masterpiece into this thing that we call a book. You sell it. The string, namely the publisher, gets this much of the price. The bookseller gets this much, and the author gets that much, enough for some cheese sandwiches, and to keep you going until you write the next deathless masterpieces. Occasionally somebody makes a great deal of money out of doing this. So Harry Potter, not a problem. 50 Shades of Grey. 50 more shades of gray, other different shades of gray, lots 60. Of money, 70, whatever, 70 shades of off-white, whatever they may be. What is it? It's safe sadomasochism. Mm-hmm. And also it puts the woman at the center of the plot. Everybody loves her, and she gets to go shopping. So that's the appeal. I know you're going to ask this. So every once in a while that happens, but most of the time it doesn't. Yeah. So anyone who thinks that I will be a writer, I will make lots of money, I will have a pension plan, forget it. Maybe yes, but most likely no.
Bueno, esas son algunas fórmulas. Yo me pregunto si explorar en las nuevas tecnologías funciona también como una manera, no sé si de hacerse rico, pero de sacar dinero, porque he estado leyendo que hay una aplicación, hablando de las nuevas tecnologías, Margaret Atwood acaba de firmar una aplicación que se llama Zombies Run, y que es una aplicación para correr, pero que tiene una historia de zombies. Y tenía curiosidad porque...
No, that's not my invention. That is the invention of Naomi Alderman. So she is doing quite well with it, but it's nothing to do with me, except I appear as a guest in one episode of it. Yes, it's an exercise game.
Pero con zombies, vinculada a una historia de zombies.
Well, what it is yes, you put it into your iPod, stick it in your ears, go for your run on your treadmill or in a park, wherever, and you are always runner number 5. You can get a T-shirt that says that, because they've got merchandise. You can buy it. So you runner number 1, you're running along in a world that has been taken over by zombies, but a few people are holding out. And you're out collecting supplies for them. So you have a dispatcher, and it says, collect the water bottle. So you collect that. Collect the Band-Aid, you collect that. Run along, and it measures how fast you're running, okay, your heartbeat, all of that. And then it says, you're clear, it's all right, no zombies around. And then it says, oh, I've made a terrible mistake. I don't know how this happened. There's zombies all around you. Run! You have to run faster for 1 minute, and it measures.
Does it work?
Well, if you run fast enough, you get away from the zombies. If you don't, they eat you. You have to start another episode. So this comes in episodes. They've done season number 1. It's like an old radio show. And I'm in season number 2. In my episode, England has finally made contact with Canada after months of not hearing from Canada. I am in something called the CN Tower, which is high. Zombies are bad with stairs. They're not very good, so they can't get up. And I'm talking to England about the situation in Canada, which is the whole government has been zombified. Also, the NHL Hockey League, them too. Zombies on skates, doesn't work. So I'm telling them that, and I'm telling them what I'm seeing out the window. And so it goes. And then we move back to runner number 5, who's out collecting water bottles and things. And they're developing one called Zombies Row for people who like to row in rowboats. And I would like them to do one called Zombies Skate, in which you're skating away from the zombies, but I don't think that will happen.
Hay que tener cuidado con lo que se dice sobre los zombies y los políticos, porque aquí a veces bromeamos con eso, ¿no? Que los políticos que están pasando una situación complicada, no solamente el gobierno de Inglaterra, podrían estar muertos y que no se han enterado todavía, por la situación difícil en la que estamos viviendo. ¿Había una pregunta más? ¿Sí?
Well, of course, the question is whether the electorate knows it.
Yes.
Ya está. Vale. Pues puedo preguntar en inglés, ¿no?
Sí.
Okay. Hi. I was wondering to what extent you include like real life experiences in your works. For example, if somebody says something that you find really interesting, or you have a conversation with somebody, would you ever think of including their words in a novel or a short story or anything? Or
No
do you
question.
kind of tend to imagine situations more?
Of course I would. But I would change them around. The interesting thing about that is that every time you write a novel, some people who are not in it think that they are. And some other people who are in it do not recognize that fact. That happens every time. So no matter what you do, and it's similar with autobiographies and novels. So anyone who writes an autobiography, we live in a cynical age. People think they're lying. But if you write a novel, you say it's fiction, people think it's disguised truth, that you've just changed the names, that it really happened to you. So The Handmaid's Tale, a gentleman once said to me, "This is autobiography, isn't it?" And I said, "No, it's set in the future." He said, "That's no excuse."
Eso es una buena.
So I think the answer to an author always is, that's no excuse.
Es una excuse.
So somebody is always going to think they're in it, and somebody is always going to be irritated by it, and somebody else is always going to not recognize that they are in it.
Pero siempre hay una parte. Siempre hay una parte de tu experiencia. There's always a part of you in what you write.
Yes, well, anything you write in a novel has happened to you in some sense, in that you've thought about it, you've read about it, you've overheard it, you've based it on several different people, you've used real clothing, etc. And sometimes you've used real historical events. My novel, Alias Grace, is based on a real double murder that actually took place. So, of course, there's an interface between fiction and reality. How could it not be? But every time you're writing about the future, you're really writing about the present, because guess what? Nobody's been to the future. Every time, this is a terrible thing to have to reveal, but Dante did not actually go to the Inferno. He made it up. He put real people in it, but he wasn't there. Don't tell.
My question is, when was the moment when you realized that you want to be a writer, or you could become a writer? And do you think that there is a certain definition of being a writer, or characteristics that a person should possess? Thank you.
16, crossing the football field in Toronto in 1956. That's just true. What caused this realization? I wrote quite a bad poem, which I thought was quite a good poem, and it was more interesting than anything else that I was doing, more interesting to me. Are there any characteristics that a person should have in order to be a writer? No, except that they have to be interested in putting words on the page. If they're not interested in putting words on the page, they will not be a writer. But apart from that, they can be from any country, they can be any age, they can be any gender, they can be from any socioeconomic group, there are no barriers to entry of that kind. Usually people who become writers are passionate readers, but sometimes that can develop later in life. They may not have started out that way. Do they have to have had any particular strange experiences in childhood? Not necessarily. When you look at all of the writers that you know and what you know about their lives, they're extremely varied. So the answer to your question is yes, you can do it too. But you have to be persistent. You have to keep at it.
No veo. ¿Sí? Hola, buenas tardes. En primer lugar, agradecer a Margaret el que esté aquí y decirle el inmenso placer que es poderla oír en directo. Es una persona intelectualmente muy activa, por supuesto, y muy inquieta, y nos está demostrando que está a la última. Me gustaría preguntarle realmente de lo que se está escribiendo y de lo que está saliendo ahora, ¿qué le parece a ella que es más interesante, aparte de su obra, que por supuesto lo es?
What's the most interesting about the writing that is being done now?
Sí, ¿no? Yo entiendo que sí.
Okay.
¿Qué es lo que te parece más de lo que se está escribiendo ahora, ¿no? ¿De nuevos autores o de...? Sí.
Yes. Okay, one of the most interesting things is that people are writing in great numbers. So all of these things that we hear about the novel being dead or writing being dead, etc., it's just not true. I would say probably more writing and publishing is being done right now than ever before. Mm-hmm. The difference is that it's like television, in that once upon a time there were just a few channels, and now there are this many. So it's impossible for one single writer to mesmerize an entire reading public the way certain writers did in the 18th and 19th century. There are just too many channels. So I couldn't single out just a few things that are interesting about the writing today, because it's extremely varied. I think that, I don't know, I mean, it's always a question of individual writers. And that's one of the problems with publishing. It's not like selling shoes. Mm-hmm. It's not like selling beer. It's one book, one author at a time. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of presenting that one person and one book in a very, very crowded field. So people sometimes get discouraged. They think, I wrote my book, it was like heaving a brick into the swamp, nobody noticed. There is this problem. It has always been a problem to some extent. I think it's more now because there are so many people writing on so many different platforms, so many different kinds of writing appearing in so many ways. It's very hard to keep up with it. In fact, you can't keep up with it. There's too much. Yeah. In 1960 in Canada, there were 5 novels published in English by Canadian publishers in that year. It was very easy to keep track of it. You could read that in a week. You can't do it anymore. It's just impossible. So, what is the answer to your question? I don't know, and it's largely a matter of luck when you find something that really appeals to you. Sometimes you get recommendations through your Twitter following. Sometimes, and we often do, we get recommendations from our friends. So these ways of passing books around, it often is from one reader to another. I asked Alberto to send me 10 books that he found of great interest in the winter, and he did. He sent me the list. I got them all. I liked about 5 of them. 5 of them, the other 5 I wasn't so keen on. We can talk about it later. I have a friend who's always asking me for book recommendations, so it's like that. I think it still is something that gets passed from hand to hand. I just read this. I really loved it. And movies too. I think it happens the same way.
Y eso es lo que queremos nosotros, escuchar hoy dos recomendaciones de los libros, porque además he leído también en alguna ocasión que lee varios libros a la vez, los tiene en la mesilla y según va leyendo va saliendo. Dos autores recientes, algo que haya leído Margaret Atwood recientemente, que le haya gustado tanto como para recomendarlo, tuitearlo o recomendarlo a sus amigos.
I think that's mean. I'll tell you what I'm going to read next, but it's not a novel. I'm really interested in reading a book by Oliver Sacks called Hallucinations.
Okay.
So it's about weird brain things.
Oliver Sacks es el neuro...
Yes.
Sí, okay.
Yeah, so what he's...
El hombre que confundió a su mujer con un sombrero.
Yes.
Es uno de los
yes,
títulos.
That's right. Yes.
Sí.
Yes.
Hallucinations.
Yes. So he has a book called Hallucinations, and it has a part in it concerning a syndrome called Charles Bonnet syndrome, in which you see little people with hats dancing on the table. I would like to see that. But I've actually known somebody who experienced that, so it's quite interesting to me. It's a cross-cultural phenomenon. So I'm going to read that book next. And John le Carré, an author of whom I'm very fond, has a new book coming out. I will certainly read that. I think if you're looking at books of the 20th century and what characterized an era, I think the Cold War, you would have to pick Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy and Smiley's People as very characteristic of that moment in political international history. In Canada, Alice Munro published a book in the fall called Dear Life.
This next fall.
Dear Life. No, she just published it.
Just published.
Yeah, in 2012. If you want to hear me reading out loud a story by Mavis Gallant, another very good Canadian short story writer, you can go onto the New Yorker blog, you can go onto the New Yorker website and find a podcast of that story and a discussion of it afterwards. Okay, so that's several recommendations that I have just given you. Okay, if you want to read a book about First Nations politics and situation of First Nations in Canada, the book is The Inconvenient Indian, and it's by Thomas King. K-I-N-G, highly recommended. There you go. Several different books.
Pues tenemos ya un completo, para no solamente de que está ya publicado, sino que está por publicar. Nos queda muy poquito tiempo, pero yo creo que una última pregunta.
Gracias por estar aquí. Y yo le quería preguntar por el primer libro que leí de usted, que me impresionó hasta ahora, El cuento de la criada, y esas 3 clasificaciones de mujeres. ¿Usted cree, ahora si escribiera ese libro, o podría escribir ese libro, y cómo clasificaría? ¿O eso ya es ficción, o todavía no ha llegado, o estamos en ello? Gracias.
All right. The Handmaid's Tale is the subject. It is set in the future, in which a religious totalitarianism has taken over the United States, and as all totalitarianisms do, it is controlling women through their reproductive facilities, as it were. And as all totalitarianisms do, those at the top have more than those at the bottom. They have more by decree rather than just by accumulation as in capitalism. I based The Handmaid's Tale on real history. I put nothing in it that had not already been done or for which we did not have the technology. One of the most frightening things about it that people found was that women's financial lives could be controlled immediately through their online banking and credit card accounts, and that could happen to you tomorrow. Your assets could be frozen tomorrow. By the way, sew some things into the hem of your coat. Resist any attempt to get rid of cash money. Cash money is called liquid for a good reason. There's no record of it. You can exchange it without having an online presence. Be very suspicious of online presence in general. The internet leaks like a sieve and is used for social control, just letting you know. So The Handmaid's Tale, would I write it differently now? I think it's probably more pertinent now than it was when I wrote it, which is why it was so often mentioned during the recent U.S. presidential election. I heard a lot about it on Twitter, people saying, guess what, Republicans, The Handmaid's Tale is not a recipe. So what we're seeing in the United States now is people trying to institute some of the things that are in that book. Not the outfits. Those may come later. But the general idea is with us today, possibly more so than in 1985 than when I wrote it. I would probably add in some technology of today if I were writing it today. But that would be the only difference. The historical material in it, as I say, it's historical. People have done these things in different societies, and that part would, of course, stay. So it's less fiction now than when I wrote it, would be the answer to your question. And for that reason, we have seen the e-book sales go way up. Yeah, people are worried, and they have some cause to be worried. So that is, unfortunately, the truth. And what else can I tell you about that?
Me preguntaba si no le tentaría la idea de un libro en el que, más allá de hablar de la manipulación genética o de los problemas que pueden traer un cambio climático, es decir, todo aquello que ella haya abordado ya en sus libros, se plantee el hipercontrol a través de Google, de los buscadores y a través de todo el rastro que vamos dejando en la red, hasta el punto que la red conoce más de nosotros mismos, no ya nuestra familia o nuestra pareja o nuestros hijos, sino posiblemente sabe más que nosotros mismos acerca de qué nos preocupa, qué queremos y qué queremos hacer. Eso quizás dé para una siguiente novela. En cualquier caso, lo único que espero, Margaret, es que no siga los pasos de Philip Roth, que ha anunciado ya directamente que deja de escribir. Afortunadamente no he visto ningún síntoma de cansancio con su trabajo y con su gran pasión, y me gusta la idea de pensar que sigue siendo una mujer sospechosa, no solamente de escribir todo lo que escribe, sino además nada miedosa a la hora de explorar nuevos territorios. Ha sido un auténtico placer, Margaret Atwood, conocerte y compartir este rato contigo. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias a todos.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure for Gutun Zuria Festival as well, having you both here with us and listening to the way you create. Thank you very much. Eskerrik asko bioi. Eta zuei ere eskerrik asko arretagatik. Os recordamos simplemente que tendréis ahora la ocasión de mantener un contacto directísimo con la autora, con Margaret Atwood, en el encuentro que va a mantener con sus lectores y lectoras. Os ofrece la posibilidad de pedirle alguna firma y también os lo recuerdo de degustar el vino que Bodega Urbana ha embotellado expresamente para esta ocasión. Por tanto, os invitamos a que os quedéis. Mila esker guztioi eta datozen egunetan ere berriz elkar ikusiko dugulakoan, Gabon pasa.